The Horseman's Corner is an original production of Howard Hale Broadcasting, on the air since 1994 with over 7,000 episodes with people involved in the world of horses. Today, the program is hosted and produced by Nelsino Lehman and Brian Hale. Visit horsemanscorner.com for more, including longer interviews exclusive to the web, full archives, our own equine podcast search engine, made possible by Van Hargis Horsemanship. I'm Howard's son, Brian, and we welcome you to the Horseman's Corner. We'll be back with today's guest right after this.
I'd like to invite you to visit the website that we have for the horseman. That's horsemanscorner.com. Good place to advertise, good place to go if you're looking for horse information. That's horsemanscorner.com.
Now here's Nelsina with our guest, Toby Tooke.
Good evening, Toby.
Hello. Nice to hear a friendly voice from back home.
Yeah, back home being Ekalaka. So your grandmother and my grandmother were best friends. You're considerably younger than I am, but like I said, you're Tooke, so everybody knew who you were. Tell us about Feek's Vision.
Pre-pandemic, I was approached by Ken Howie. He worked for the Cowboy Channel and RFD, and he found out about the story of Grandpa Feek and said, well, this is kind of a interesting story. And he goes, we should do this, do a little, 20-minute, half-hour show. And then he realized it is way, way bigger than just 20 minutes, half hour. It's a long story. I mean, Grandpa Feek was one of 6 boys, and he quit school in 8th grade to kind of chase his dream of raising bucking horses. And him and the boys his brothers put on rodeos in the 30s. I think they had quite a bit of fun doing it because they did it all. They were the announcers, they were the clowns, they were the shoot help, they were everything. And I've got some old posters, and it's interesting because those rodeos they put on, they'd start off with, a baseball game, and then they'd have wild mare milking. They'd have the rodeo, and then they'd have a dance. And I mean, it was an all-day, all-weekend ordeal when they got together. And then Grandpa kind of, I think, decided to take it a little more serious, and he ended up buying King Largo, an Iowa State Fair Blue Ribbon winner, and that was kind of the foundation of everything you see today, from you'll see King's Genetics, in Calgary, in Butler, in Sankey, in Powder River, in all of those great strings. Yeah, Grandpa he loved horses. And that's one thing. He's known for bucking horses, but he loved race horses. He loved work horses. He loved breaking horses. Any horse that he thought he could find a use for, he would take it to the ranch and break it or whatnot. So, and again, I never got to meet my great-grandfather. He passed away 12 years before I was born. He was only 58. He had kind of the pinnacle. This is the story. Quitting school, starting a rodeo company, wanting to breed horses to buck, and everybody's saying you can't do it. He ends up in the arena in Oklahoma City with an award for a horse he bred, he raised, he sold to Rodeo Inc., and he rode out and had a heart attack holding the trophy for the first really born-to-bred horse, which was Sheep Mountain. Casey Tibbs was Grandpa's first, if you want to say, endorser. Clem McSpadden wasn't far behind. Winston Bruce jumped on the train shortly after, so it kind of took off. Grandpa did all right for himself, and looking at rodeo today, well, Rodeo Inc. sold out and their horses went pretty much everywhere. We can tell that through DNA. Science doesn't lie. I was approached by Kenny Andrews and Steve Stone helping start the Bucking Horse Breeders Foundation, which essentially is to help protect buyers and sellers of horses. Because I remember my grandpa going to a sale in Rapid City, and they were dummy bucking horses out. And if you look, sales book, Tooke bred. The last name has a little weight to it. Grandpa said there was a number of those horses that come out and said Tooke bred, and he's like, I don't know who that guy is, how he got our genetics. The horse is small. It really was something I knew I had to do when they asked me to start this. And of course, I gave Grandpa a hard time being a pack rat. Well, he had saved Gray Wolf and General Custer's bones. Well, we got them DNA'd. They're registered 1 and 2. And roughly about 90% of any bucking horses in the arena today go back to what Grandpa Feek started back in the 30s. He was a very quiet guy, from what I've been told, but I think he'd be pretty proud of what he accomplished after he'd passed as to his influence on rodeos. And I'm just trying to tell the story, and with Feek's vision, it's telling the story. We've got some of the biggest names in rodeo in there. Mel Potter, he considered Grandpa Feek one of his best friends. Mel just got into the Rodeo Hall of Fame this past year. Got to see him. He's 93, I believe, and he's always been, I talk to him about once a month. It's always nice to hear stories about Grandpa. Some of the other guys in there, Quentin Johnson, pretty much anybody that rode horses. We got Deb Copenhavers in it. We got him before he passed. Harry Vold we interviewed 2 days before he passed away. I mean, there's just been an immense support and appreciation from contractors and cowboys across the board. The PRCA is behind us on this documentary. Kent Sermon, the guy running the hall, said, I don't know if there's ever been a film or ever will be a film with this many great cowboys, contractors. Just has been a labor of love. I've been a grunt behind the scenes for Ken, and it's cool to see him work and be able to tell the stories. The thing that sucks is my grandparents, both Ernest and Peggy, both were alive when we started it and have now passed. Really bittersweet that they won't be able to see the documentary. I will definitely tear up a little bit because we've got about 13 hours of my grandpa being interviewed. I haven't got to see it. Ken kind of keeps it under wrap. I'm excited for it to get done and be released for people to know where all these bucking horses come from. And there's a lot of contractors doing this. I've found there's some contractors that want to take all the credit for raising and breeding and doing all theirs, but there's a lot of them that are very appreciative. We are getting close to being done. Max Carl from Grand Funk Railroad, he's doing the sound for it, the project that I'm super excited for, and Ken even got me on camera for a few seconds. So I'm excited, and I hope everybody else is excited. I think both grandpas will be pretty proud for this to get done, and it was always all about the horses for both of them, Feek and Ernest. It was more of the horses. They definitely are known worldwide. I get contacted on our Facebook page. Guys, they've got seamen from Birches from Lunatic Fringe, Australia. They're over just all around the globe, and it's kind of cool because, again, DNA doesn't lie, and it's neat to see how that spread.
Do you need help with anything website related? Hale Multimedia has been in the business of helping others for over 20 years. Please give us a call at 940-224-6315 or visit halemultimedia.com. Anything website related, we're here to help you. That's halemultimedia.com.
I remember talking with both your grandparents, Ernest and Peggy. What wonderful people. Peggy was absolutely a gem, and Ernest he was a quiet man, but if you could get him started talking about bucking horses, he absolutely lit up, and I remember him telling stories that were just wonderful. I'm glad that you're continuing on with this legacy, because what a wonderful story to be told, and of course proud because that's home for us. I have to ask you, what's your favorite bucking horse?
It's such a wide array. I mean, I can go back to the early horses. I say Indian Sign, just because I've seen actual footage that Grandpa had. He wasn't our biggest horse, not our most well-known horse, but by far the most athletic horse. You get banned by the RCA for being too rank, you know you're a bad horse. Again, you know, you can go down the list, the Sheep Mountains, the Major Renos, the Deacon Browns, Sunset Strips, the A-team that Grandpa sent to Rodeo Inc., Mel said, they went from an absolute nobody to having the best horses in the world overnight. And they ended up getting 3 truckloads from Grandpa. And that's probably my favorite story that Grandpa would tell is Feek called Mel and said, hey, I got some horses. You guys want them? Well, Mel had no idea who Grandpa was. So Mel called Bill Linderman and said, hey, do you know Feek Tooke? Bill and Grandpa had started the Miles City Bucking Horse sale together. They'd done a lot of things together. And Bill said, well, yeah, I know, Feek. Selling you the horses, you're going to have the best in the world, but he's probably rather sell his wife than the horses, from a whole lot of nothing to top. And I think that first NFR, they sent, was it 12 or 14 horses to the NFR. They come in and just cleaned house. And then as far as the newer horses, I love Lunatic Fringe, Lunatic from Hell, Craig at Midnight. There is more great bucking horses now than there ever has been. And that's what I tell these contractors. You took what Grandpa started, took it the next step, the breeding, the back and forth, talking to Hank and Lori from Powder River. They said, yeah, what your great-grandpa started, we don't veer too far off of that. Cross it back and forth. Why do you want to dilute what he started and is proven to work? When you have those words like that from those top contractors, it really hits you. That I never rodeoed. I got on a few steers at a youth rodeo, but been more on the other side of it. The history and genetics, the appreciation, very humbling to know Grandpa's story, and then Ernest taking over, and then, my dad, because we've still got about 50 horses out at the ranch now. I think the funnest day, other than my kids being born, is we built an arena behind our ranch for the documentary, Horseshoe Arena. Had some old cars and wagons out there to finish it off, and we bucked horses that, go back to King Largo, back to the horses that Feek had in the 30s, and buck them on the prairie in that lodgepole arena. And there was no cell phones on set, and it just was one of the funnest days, getting to see those horses buck, those cowboys riding. It was very cool. And then at the end of the day, you looked up on the hill and there's some more horses sitting up there watching, and just I wish more people could have been there. It was very, very cool.
Our guest on this segment of the program and the next three is Toby Tooke with our special host, Nelsina Lehman. We'll be back with more after this. You're listening to The Horseman's Corner. The Horseman's Corner is an original production of Howard Hale Broadcasting, on the air since 1994 with over 7,000 episodes with people involved in the world of horses. Today, the program is hosted and produced by Nelsina Lehman and Brian Hale. Visit horsemanscorner.com for more, including longer interviews exclusive to the web, full archives, our own equine podcast search engine, made possible by Van Hargis Horsemanship. I'm Howard's son, Brian, and we welcome you to the Horseman's Corner. We'll be back with today's guest right after this.
I'd like to invite you to visit the website that we have for the horseman. That's horsemanscorner.com. Good place to advertise, good place to go if you're looking for horse information. That's horsemanscorner.com.
Welcome to segment 2 of the Horseman's Corner. Now let's continue the conversation that Nelsina was having with our guest, Toby Tooke.
Well, my dad used to run with some of the Tooke boys, the next generation, and he always said that one of the highlights of his life was being able to run bucking horses. He said that was the biggest rush of anything he'd ever done. So, and I'm pretty sure he chased a Tooke bucking horse or two around more than once.
Watching the NFR, it was a couple of years ago, and I got a text from Dr. Greg Velklausen down there in Texas, who does the DNA, and it was right to the 10th perf, and I go, what's Dr. V text me for? And it just simply said 29 of the 30 go back to Tooke bloodlines. So, I mean, you talk about the money perf, the last perf of the biggest rodeo, and you've got 29 out of the 30. I mean, that's something.
That's a legacy all its own.
Yeah, and the one horse that everybody always asks, does he go back to ours? And he does not, is Virgil, and that is an amazing horse. Yeah, that's one of the few that I know that doesn't go back. Like you said, the Sankeys, the Sparky, J-Bar J up in Circle, all these guys, and once in a while they'll reach out and go, hey, how does this horse go back? You know, they're looking farther down the line as to when our horses, when we had them back, and just looking at the pedigree, and it just, rodeo is a very cool, close-knit family, and like I said, I never rode, and I do the best I can to carry on Grandpa Feek's legacy, Grandpa Ernest. I mean, I talked to him. I picked his brain I grew up on the ranch, and then when I moved up here to Billings, I talked to him every night. And once he passed, I was like, oh, man, how much did I retain of all these phone calls and the history and stuff? And it a lot of it stuck, and a lot of it I've tried to write it down, and it's on our Facebook page, Tooke Bucking Horses. And that was what I missed the most is, talking for an hour, 2 hours, and then jumping on the computer and posting a picture with a story. And like I said, you knew Grandpa, and once you got him going, there was no real shutting him down. And that's what was funny is the first interview we had for the documentary, he got there and he kind of didn't really talk, and I started asking the questions, and he started going, and he talked until the mic battery ran out. And the producer goes, hold on, I'll go get another one. And he just took the microphone. It was a mic drop. He took it off and said, nope, I'm done for today. and Ken goes, your grandpa's a unique guy. I said, yep. And I said, if you want to get a special side of him, get him in old Brown, the old pickup, and just drive around out in the pasture through the horses and cows. I said, it'll be gold. And Ken did that. And he said that was one of the best interviews. It's just no pressure, driving around his place and talking. And I said, I told you. So you'll get to see some of that footage of Grandpa in the Speaks Vision documentary.
Well, your grandpa never got to rodeo because he had polio as a young man. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I'll Tarantino it. I'll start from the back and come forward. My grandpa, him and we were tight all growing up, and I'll tell you, when I got the call from my mom that Grandpa wasn't doing well and she said he's not going to make it through the day, jumped in my ride, got to Ekalaka, and he held on for me, and he died holding my hand. And going back and talking to some of the nurses, Grandpa said he never felt like a normal person with his polio. And I was like, man, you're like Superman to me. He rode bulls. He had the highest recorded bull ride in Wyoming history for a long time. And I remember him talking about going to Deadwood and riding. He said, yeah, Dad put on the rodeo, and I showed up, and it was me and the best bull riders in the world. He said, I ended up winning, and I couldn't get home fast enough to buy a 270. He said, I left town and everybody knew who Ernest Tooke was. And I'm like, oh, whatever. And then, because he only rode until he was 20. And finally, there was one day I asked him, I said, well, why'd you retire? Well, I got on this bull, Bushy Bill of Alice Greeno's up in Haber, and I got hung up and hooked me in the ribs. That wasn't an education. I drew the same damn bull in Forsyth the next weekend, did the same damn thing, and I couldn't get home quick enough to hang up my spurs. So that was it. And he said, well, and I realized that it was just easier to raise bucking horses and put on rodeos than it would be. Because Grandpa got his RCA card when he was 14, a dual card, so he could ride and put them on. So I always thought that was kind of cool, putting it on, and there's pictures of him with, putting on rodeos, and there he is riding bulls and with his heroes. And I'm like, that is just nuts.
Yeah, it was a life well lived, and that's what more can you ask for?
I'd like to invite you to visit the website that we have for the horseman. That's horsemanscorner.com. There's a lot of information there, some good horses for sale, some sales that are coming up, and some broadcasts and podcasts that you'll really enjoy and use as a learning tool, because it's a great source for the horseman. Good place to advertise, good place to go if you're looking for horse information. That's horsemanscorner.com.
Welcome back to the Horseman's Corner. Let's continue with Toby Tooke.
I don't know if you know this, knowing Grandpa, but rodeo horses were important to him, but flying was more important to him. And he always said that, flying come first. And I remember flying and checking the bucking horses, and it is such a tool when you are in the rodeo business to be able to fly. And I mean, you look at guys, like Donnie Gay, who flies, and I know Mel Potter flying Sherry to all her rodeos, it's just such an asset at the ranch and in that sport, and it's just kind of cool to hear the stories. I think it was Deb Copenhaver talking about flying from one rodeo up here, and it gets you from A to B, and you got to get there, otherwise you're turning out. And Deb said it was a foggy day. We probably shouldn't have been flying, and all I know is we when the fog broke, we were underneath a bridge flying, and he goes, I got on the ground and I think his exact words were, kissed the ground, and I didn't really want to get back in the plane. But it's just so many stories from these old guys, and I believe that's going to be in, some of that stuff will be in the documentary. I mean, we've got not only Tooke history, but there's going to be, I'm hoping, another DVD with rodeo history. And I mean, it's just, I crave it. I love it. Stories that a lot of us don't get to hear, and it's just preserving our sport, preserving, the legacy of great cowboys, great horses, just very, I can't say humbling enough, because I walk into, the PRCA Hall of Fame, and people are snagging me saying thank you, and I mean, the last name that I was born with, it took me a while to realize what that meant in the world of rodeo, and just doing what I can to pass along, like I was telling you before we, I spoke at a college and talking to kids that had never been to a rodeo or don't know anything about rodeo. It is very cool to see kids kind of look at you, and you're like, at the end of it, hey, yeah, we're going to go to the rodeo and check it out. And it just is very cool to see that younger generation get excited for something that, isn't like an overpaid NBA star or overpaid NFL star, guys that, ranch during the week, and then they get to a rodeo and try to make a paycheck. You make a living off of trying to ride a horse or a bull or throwing a loop.
Let's take a quick break before we move on to segment number 3. You're listening to The Horseman's Corner. We've produced over 2,500 podcasts during the past year, including the Harvest USA, Daily Ag Markets, The Horseman's Corner, and our fastest-growing podcast, The Cattleman's Corner. This record-setting growth in listenership and, more importantly, downloads means your message could reside permanently on people's computers and phones everywhere when you become a sponsor of these podcasts. Contact us at halemultimedia.com for more information on this opportunity. That's halemultimedia.com.
I'd like to invite you to visit the website that we have for the Horseman. That's horsemanscorner.com. There's a lot of information there, some good horses for sale, some sales that are coming up, and some broadcasts and podcasts that you'll really enjoy and use as a learning tool, because it's a great source for the horseman. Good place to advertise, good place to go if you're looking for horse information. That's horsemanscorner.com.
The Horseman's Corner is an original production of Howard Hale Broadcasting, on the air since 1994 with over 7,000 episodes with people involved in the world of horses. Today, the program is hosted and produced by Nelsino Lehman and Brian Hale. Visit horsemanscorner.com for more, including longer interviews exclusive to the web, full archives, our own equine podcast search engine, made possible by Van Hargis Horsemanship. I'm Howard's son, Brian, and we welcome you to the Horseman's Corner. We'll be back with today's guest right after this.
I'd like to invite you to visit the website that we have for the Horseman. That's horsemanscorner.com. Good place to advertise, good place to go if you're looking for horse information. That's horsemanscorner.com.
Welcome back to segment 3 of the Horseman's Corner, and once again we have a special guest, Toby Tooke. Let's listen in.
Well, you're an ambassador to something that I think growing up I took for granted. And the reason I say that is because we lived it. You could go to town, walk down the street, see these people that you knew their names, you knew where they lived, you knew what they did. And it just didn't hit me until I went to the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame, and I'm walking around this building, and it dawns on me all of the livestock and all of the people that I recognize because of my grandparents and my parents and the bucking horses and all that entire world that seems to be in one small bubble. My grandparents were in Oklahoma City when Feek passed away, and I know that it was devastating for them, and not just because Feek was an icon, but because they had lost a friend. And
yep.
for you to carry this on, I can't tell you how proud I am of you, because I know that this is not for financial gain.
No.
This is a labor of love.
Well, and I go, to the bar back home, going to the doghouse there, and people, I bet you're just raking in the money from this movie. I'm like, I haven't made a damn cent. And the money that we do make, anything we make off that movie, 10% goes back to the museum in Ekalaka. I'm like, I don't want it. I am putting back into home,
Oh,
and
good for you. Thank you. That's wonderful.
And they're looking to expand, and there is a big exhibit in there of Tooke artifacts, pictures, coats, awards, saddles. Like you said, we're known for dinosaurs and bucking horses. And the cool part about it is, I mentioned Grandpa had saved the bones to Gray Wolf and General Custer. Nate Carroll had approached me. He goes, well, with technology today, and we can scan those bones. I said, well, we don't have them all. No, if we have someone, we can get the general size. And they want to do a full life-size scan of Gray Wolf and or General Custer and have it in the museum. So I thought that would be kind of cool to see the actual size of those horses, 17 hands weighing a ton, bucking horse in there with all these dinosaurs.
Hey, if you got it, want it. That is beyond cool right there. That is wow. I remember as a kid watching the horses buck, and then watch the NFR and go, well, that horse was Frontier Airlines, or that horse was this horse, and have people go, they were proud of the lineage. They were, and I'm so glad somebody's documenting this.
Yeah, and it's fun to see, and that was when we were DNAing and Custer, which is one of the greatest breeding stallions of all time. Harry Vold had him and then sold him to, Harry said his biggest regret was selling him to Ike Sankey. That horse has had more world champions come out of it than any other stud. And story goes, Harry, he was trading horses with Grandpa, and he said, hey, I'm going to bring up these 6 mares. I want you to breed them to General Custer. Grandpa said, okay. Brought him up. Well, Custer ran 3 of them off. So Grandpa's like, well, heck, I'll put him with Gray Wolf. Well, he ran 1 of them off. Well, that lone mare Grandpa put with Timberline. Well, they all got bred, loaded them up, and with the DNA, because they exhumed Custer, he was buried on the Sankey place, and they exhumed him, and they're like, this DNA of Custer does not go back to Tooke's General Custer. So I got a call from the BHBA real quick. Hey, what's going on with this? And Ernest had said, oh yeah, that probably, because we've got Custer's bones and we've got Gray Wolf's bones. If he doesn't go back to either of them, it's at a Timberline. So it's cool seeing that, and just again, the BHBA is great for the sport and great for anybody that just loves bucking horses in the history. Because I've had people approach me, hey, I've had a number of people, hey, I've got a horse that goes back to Indian sign, and I let them tell their story. And then I go, well, I hate to break it to you, but Indian sign was a gelding, so I don't know who told you that, but you don't have an offspring of Indian sign.
That's kind of what went through my head too. It's like I thought he was a gelding.
Yep.
Whatever floats your boat.
So that's the beauty of I can't praise the VHBA enough with, I preserve history, but again, science doesn't lie. And, I can't tell you, if you're listening and you have a horse that's a little bronky or whatever and want to see, get a hold of them, pull some mane, put it in there, and they can go, oh, hey, this goes back to this horse, or this doesn't go back to anything in our database. But it's really cool to piece that puzzle together as to, broncs, because, and Dr. V had said that almost all bucking horses go back to 6 mares way back in like the 30s.
Really? I did not know that.
The mare side of it, everybody thinks it's the stud side, but from what Dr. V says, it's the mare side and I guess I think about it now, and Grandpa had talked about, we had a mare that Grandpa called Goldie, and Grandpa's like, we could put her with, General Custer or Prince, horse bucked. We could put her with one of the horses Grandpa used to pull the hay wagon. The colt would buck. So I after, hearing that from Dr. V and talking to Grandpa and stuff, he said that doesn't surprise me, that there's, those handful of mares that are kind of the foundation for everything. So.
Well, that's interesting. I know that my grandpa always used to say that different people would say, well, I don't want to ride a mare or whatever. And he is like, where do you think good horses come from?
Yep. Yeah, and and that was always what Mel told me, is when Rodeo Inc., most of the horses that they had or got from us, they were geldings or mares, and because I'd quizzed Mel, and I was like, well, did you ever breed any? He's like, no, your grandpa just kept sending us truckloads of great horses, so we didn't breed anything. And Grandpa was telling me about the first time Mel and Jack and John flew out to the ranch, and of course, did you ever know Faye, Uncle Faye?
Only through by reputation, we'll say. I heard great stories about him.
But Uncle Faye, he was there when the plane landed, and old Jack Brainerd rolled up and said, wish I would have brought a bronc saddle. I would have topped one of these off. And Faye just said, if you could do that, we'll give you the whole ranch. So, and they saddled up to go ride out to look at all the horses with Tooke and Brainerd. Of course, Jack, he was like 5'2". He was just a little guy. And they didn't have enough saddles, so they had Jack in a bronc saddle out there riding through. And they got back to the ranch, and here comes the horse with the bronc saddle, and Jack was not on the horse. So he couldn't even ride the saddle horse, let alone top one off to take the Tooke ranch. So I always thought that was a good story as to Jack, and I got to talk to him and ask him about it. I think Mel and your grandfather embellished that a little bit.
Certainly not. Oh, so do they have any prognosis for when the docuseries is going to be done, or the documentary for the Feeks Vision?
It is close. I got a rough cut of it. When was that? Week and a half ago. It was the first half of it, and well worth the wait. Seeing all the guys in there. Even we've got pickup men talking about trying to pick up the Tooke horses. Gail Warner, who's a historian, it just is cool. And I had got some footage, old footage. Grandpa had a camera, an old reel-to-reel camera. So I've got a bunch of these horses from back in the 50s and 60s in action, and I've got it put on DVD and digitized, and so we're going to be seeing some of that in there. And I laughed because Grandpa, he would ration them out to me, like they were library books. He'd go, well, here's 2. Okay. I'd get those done, and I'd come back and goes, well, here's these 2. Like, why the hell didn't you just give them all to me at one time so I can get them all done? But then after he passed away and Grandma passed away, I'd found all of the cans, and I got them all done. And I watched, well, there was a lot of those where Ernest was eating the dirt quite a bit, so I'm sure that's why he didn't give me some of those cans. But yeah, we've got some cool artists working on it, some 3D artistry in there. It's well worth the wait, and I've always we started it before the pandemic, and this has all been donation based, so that means even more to me that everybody out there wants to see this and wants to hear this story. By donating money to this project, it means the world to me, because when they told me the price of this, my butt puckered a little bit, and I said, I don't know where are we going to get all that money? And because there's a lot that goes into it, you know, the equipment, the time, the travel, the everything, the editing, you know, paying Max to do music. I reached out to have Sam Elliott do the narration, and that would have really set us back as far as money goes, but I would have loved to have had Sam's voice on there. We haven't given out the name of who we're having for the narrator, but it'll be pretty cool. And again, it is going to be a great, top-notch production, because Ken did the special cowboy moments, the wild rides, and if you've ever seen those, you know the quality of his work. And I know, well, and Ken had a heart attack during the production too, so it
I
took.
remember that.
Yep. So I mean, we've had a lot of obstacles thrown at us, and we're going to come out on top, and it's going to be shown everywhere. I know Oklahoma City wants to show it down there at the Hall of Fame. Colorado Springs wants to show it. I've already had like 4 or 5 places here in Billings want to show it. It just is very. Again, I can't thank everybody that's pre-ordered a copy or just wants to know Grandpa's story. It's something that I never would have thought, but when you think of it, boy quit in school, raised bucking horses, people told me can't overcome it. It's almost like a Disney movie, and then comes to it and he passes away at the pinnacle of, you know, he was 58 holding a trophy for a horse. It don't get much better.
Or worse, depending on your angle. But what a story. We'll continue on with segment 4 after this. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner.
I'd like to invite you to visit the website that we have for the Horseman. That's horsemanscorner.com. There's a lot of information there, some good horses for sale, some sales that are coming up, and some broadcasts and podcasts that you'll really enjoy and use as a learning tool, because it's a great source for the horseman. Good place to advertise, good place to go if you're looking for horse information. That's horsemanscorner.com.
The Horseman's Corner is an original production of Howard Hale Broadcasting, on the air since 1994 with over 7,000 episodes with people involved in the world of horses. Today, the program is hosted and produced by Nelsino Lehman and Brian Hale. Visit horsemanscorner.com for more, including longer interviews exclusive to the web, full archives, our own equine podcast search engine, made possible by Van Hargis Horsemanship. I'm Howard's son, Brian, and we welcome you to the Horseman's Corner. We'll be back with today's guest right after this.
I'd like to invite you to visit the website that we have for the horseman. That's horsemanscorner.com. Good place to advertise, good place to go if you're looking for horse information. That's horsemanscorner.com.
Welcome to the last segment of our Horseman's Corner program. On segment 4, we have Toby Tooke. Let's continue.
I don't speak enough about, you know, when this whole Feeked vision. The one thing that I really wish is we would have done it sooner, so I could have had Thelma on it, because she passed away in 2014, and we started this a few years after that, and I always laugh at Thelma, because she always said that was Feek's widow. When Grandpa died in '68, Grandma lived by herself across from
my grandma. Yep.
Your grandma. Yep. And
yep.
and they were back and forth across the street. I was back and forth across the street to my best friend's house, and she lived there, and she had that trophy he was holding when he passed away on her living room wall. And she was more than welcoming to when I come over to ask questions about Grandpa and stuff. She was so fun to talk to, and when I asked her about certain things, how much did Grandpa spend on King Largo? I don't know. His horse business was his horse business. I just got dressed up and went to the rodeos and had fun. I mean, she was a character, and she got to travel when Grandpa put on rodeos in Chicago at the old Chicago Stadium, the same stadium that Michael Jordan won 3 championships in. She got to go to Madison Square Garden, where Grandpa sent horses to Colonel Jim Eskew. I mean, she just got to go along and take it all in, and it just I remember Ernest telling me that he was the one that answered the phone when Feek passed away, and that's the one thing he said. I don't know how I'm going to tell Mom, and I've been blessed to have Thelma and Ernest for those many years to pick their brain about a guy I never knew, and I feel like I know him pretty well, and then even talking to some of the cowboys, like Deb Copenhaver saying, over at the match ride in Dickinson, going up to Casey Tibbs and telling him, Tibbs, that horse made you look like an old woman. Just certain things like that. And Deb, the first time I met Deb, I got tattoos. I had earrings. That was the deal with Grandpa. He goes, if we do this project, you're going to have to do some stuff you don't want to do for the documentary. He said, I'll do it. You take out those stupid earrings. I said, okay, deal done. And the first time I met Deb Copenhaver, again, he's pretty short. He reached up and his hands on each ear, and he goes, what would your grandfather Feek think of these? I said, well, Deb, I said, I've been out fencing and I got more in my ears than on the post. And he said, kid, you got his humor. And that really meant a ton to me. Even though I was just being a wise guy, it just, it's kind of, like I said, cool to have people that knew him and they're like, you got that Tooke humor.
I remember my grandparents talking about Feek, and my grandpa said that probably Feek's biggest swear word was re-ride. He said, you didn't get a re-ride on a Tooke horse, because he said if you thought the first one was not good, the second one was really going to eat your lunch.
Yep. And Feek always said that the most important people at a Tooke rodeo were the chute builders, because I've heard of some of those, the older broncs getting run in and, they have to stand there for a little bit. They would just splinter those chutes. So Grandpa took a lot of pride in his horses, but he was the first one to say, if you made a good ride, he's the first one to shake your hand and say good ride. But, if you got dumped, he was going to be the first one there to maybe give you a little poke. So, and I know at Ernest, it always irked him because, we put on the rodeos in, Mouse City and Baker and Glendive, and I've got the scorecards in my office from some of those in Glendive where they would do 2 perfs, a Friday, Saturday perf. And I think in the bareback and saddle bronc, both days out of, I don't know if there was 40 total horses out, one guy rode. And Grandpa said, and I'm going to do my best Ernest impression. Grandma said it was okay, but Grandpa, he made fun of me, but Grandpa always said, well, I don't know what those boobs want. My horses threw them all in the dirt, and then we didn't get invited back. So you know what? I'll just take my horses where guys want to try to ride them and people want to see them. Okay, Ern.
That was Ernest to a T.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. I don't know what those boobs want. That sounds like Ernest.
And the same thing when Indian Sign got banned down there in Deadwood, they thought he would go over backwards. That was the big thing with Indian Sign, if he would go over backwards. And that was the one thing Grandpa wanted to see was Casey Tibbs on Indian Sign. Well, Casey broke ribs the night before, so that didn't happen because he drew Indian Sign for the final perf. And but they had banned Indian Sign, and Grandpa Poldill, well, I don't know what these boobs, that was his word, boobs. I don't know what these boobs want, but we're headed to Sentinel Butte next week, and I'll just bring my milk cows, and they can ride those. So.
Oh, Ernest, that was what a character. Well, Toby, I can't thank you enough. This is a great interview when you have tears and laughter in the same 45 minutes. That's an excellent, excellent day. I will be calling you again when we get Feek's Vision dropped in our lap. It will be a banner day for rodeo and bucking horses and the Tooke legacy and the whole deal. Thank you so much for your time and joining us on the Horseman's Corner.
No problem. Thank you for having me, and you and Kurt take care.
We've produced over 2,500 podcasts during the past year, including the Harvest USA, Daily Ag Markets, the Horseman's Corner, and our fastest-growing podcast, the Cattleman's Corner. This record-setting growth in listenership and, more importantly, downloads means your message could reside permanently on people's computers and phones everywhere when you become a sponsor of these podcasts. Contact us at halemultimedia.com for more information on this opportunity. That's halemultimedia.com.
I'd like to invite you to visit the website that we have for the Horseman. That's horsemanscorner.com. There's a lot of information there, some good horses for sale, some sales that are coming up, and some broadcasts and podcasts that you'll really enjoy and use as a learning tool, because it's a great source for the horseman. Good place to advertise, good place to go if you're looking for horse information. That's horsemanscorner.com.